Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Gabberty, the content marketing expert, bringing you 5 new episodes every week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Hello, Breakthrough Success listeners. I just wanted you all to know before the episode actually starts, I've been working a little bit behind the scenes to give you something really special. So a while ago, I wrote my book, Content Marketing Secrets, which helps people create, promote, and optimize their content for growth and revenue. And I just put the finishing touches together to offer that for free to anyone who is interested. So if you want your free copy of Content Marketing Secrets, all you have to do is head over to markgabberty.com/book. Now, let's jump right into the episode. For some people, it may seem like it's something that's very far away, but retirement is something that you have to plan for. Just making sure that you have the financials you need to live the life that you are going to enjoy. So this episode, we're actually going to talk about how to rock retirement. And this is also something that applies to entrepreneurs who they have this business they're very passionate about. They're going to work on it forever, but this also applies to you. We're going to jump into this episode right away, but let's introduce today's guest. He has over 27 years of experience walking through, basically helping his clients getting into and through retirement. He is the creator of the Agile Retirement Management Process, creator of the Retirement Standard of Care, and author of Rock Retirement, a simple guide to help you take back control and be more optimistic about the future. Today's guest for episode 252 of the Breakthrough Success podcast is none other than Roger Whitney. Roger, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Holy cow, how am I supposed to match that enthusiasm? It's great to be here. It's great to be here. When you said simple guide, for a second I thought you said simple guy. I'm like, yeah, you got that about simple guy.
Well, it is great to have you on the show, and retirement is something where I feel like people don't really think about it too much until it actually happens to them or until they're like a few years out. And again, this applies to entrepreneurs. That is something I'm really trying to stress here. So we're going to talk about how it can rock retirement, but I'd like to get a little backstory first. So can you talk about why you decided to write the book, Rock Retirement?
Well, it's a manifesto of sorts of everything that I think's wrong with how people think about retirement and how we plan for it, and how I believe we should in order to not just have a great life tomorrow, but really to have more of a life today, which is usually something everybody feels like they have to sacrifice to be okay later on. And so that was the reason. It's an extension of, the Retirement Answer Man podcast and other things. And what's interesting, Mark, is I'm a 51-year-old guy, and I only work with baby boomers and people over 50 who have hitched their wagon since they were young kids, from coming out of college to this concept of retirement. But I think the retirement is really a foreign concept for someone younger. And it's much more about how do you build a life you don't actually want to retire from than it is how do you try to be one of those people in the, the brochures that you see.
And it's interesting how you mentioned the difference between like someone who is close to retirement and someone who's nowhere like close to retirement. And many of the people listening to the show are either entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. Why should entrepreneurs care about their retirement, and what does the planning process look for them versus the traditional path?
Well, I think so define your terms for me, because you're using entrepreneur and intrapreneur, right?
Oh, I'm an entrepreneur, just like someone who has their business or wants to start one.
Well, if you think of an entrepreneur, let's talk about what that actually is. Right. This goes back to the whole what's the book? That just went out of my head. Are you building a business or are you building a job? E-Myth Revisited. See, old men can remember things. E-Myth Revisited. So when you're an entrepreneur, if you think of building a business, because I'm an entrepreneur, I own a business, it's what are you trying to accomplish? On the front end, a lot of times it's, hey, I just want to be cash flow positive, right? I want to have an income to support my family. Many of us stay there. And it's not a bad thing to build a business that is, say, a consultancy or service business where you, the owner, are the actual business. Now, that kind of business, when you're growing for the future, you got to think about, because if you're the business, you got to be there to make the business run, to generate the revenue, to provide the income and the capital. Then when you're planning for the future, you're going to have to remember to make sure you peel off a lot of the cream to take wealth that you've created from an income perspective and put it onto your personal balance sheet to invest for the future. That is a very different mindset from a financial planning aspect than an entrepreneur who's building a business in the more traditional sense where they are not required to make the business run. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because if you're building a business to leverage resources, employees and software and other things and processes and systems, you're building a business that ultimately doesn't need you to be successful. You're the one organizing all these resources to go serve some need. Well, if you're running that kind of business, then a lot of your wealth will be built within the value of the business. And in business terms, we call that enterprise value, which you unlock at some point in time, usually through a sale to an outside party or to partners or to people that you bring up within the firm. And you actually make a lot of different decisions when you're managing a business based on what you want to be. There's a wonderful book, and I know the name of this one off the top of my head. It's called Built to Sell, what talks about if you're trying to do the latter of building a business that's going to have a value that you can actually sell, then you're going to make decisions differently than someone who is the business and they're just trying to generate an income. So I think that's the first distinction you need to think about if you have a business or if you're about to start a business is it doesn't mean you can't flip between the two and change from one to the other, but you want to know what your first goal is. So that is how I would suggest you first start in thinking about building wealth ultimately for quote unquote retirement. Now, when it comes to retirement, Mark, it depends on how old you are. So the younger you are, I think you need to really just think about wealth accumulation. I mean, I'm 51, and when I think of the term retirement, if I had to define it for myself, it's going to be very vague. I'm still in the wealth accumulation standpoint. You don't have to put a number on retirement unless it's something that you really have a desire to do and you can see it on the horizon. Otherwise, it's just wealth accumulation.
And I find that distinction very important for a lot of people because it's good to do some kind of planning, but the focus would be on wealth accumulation depending on your age. And if you are closer to retirement, then it's something that you want to focus on. But is there I understand we're focused on wealth, but the retirement plan is is it supposed to be a little hazy until you're just at around that area, or is it something that you could think a little bit about early on?
Oh, I definitely think it's something that you noodle on all the time. So I think the way that you do it is you just constantly. This is what I lay out in the book. So even someone who's 60 or someone who's 25, they're going to have the same basic conversations. Now, obviously, they'll be different because they're in different phases of life. But what the book lays out is what little conversations should you have to keep taking little baby steps and keep identifying where you can be intentional on moving the ball forward. So, Mark, now how old are you, Mark? I'm putting you on the spot here.
All right, I'm 20.
All right, you're 20. See, you're a young guy. So you're a perfect age, though. You have a 50-50 chance of living over 100. Did you know that?
I didn't know it was that good.
Yeah, 50-50 chance. And that's not adjusting for social, economic, racial, and all those other things. Not adjusting for how you live health style-wise or anything else. And you're probably going to have multiple careers because the pace of change is happening so quickly. So one thing that you're comfortable with, I'm guessing you have a smartphone, right?
Yes.
And you have, and the apps on it update all the time, right? They're always updating.
Yes.
And the reason is because those apps were built with this methodology called Agile Project Management, which is about being agile and just iterating and making lots of little tweaks to things rather than trying to figure it all out. Now, traditional retirement planning and financial planning doesn't use that kind of agile approach. It uses a much more traditional, bogged down in lots of big meetings, lots of paper, and trying to forecast out years and years and years. And they haven't figured out that, especially when you're younger, but I think even if you're a baby boomer, it's not about figuring it out. It's about managing change and having the right little conversations. So what are those little conversations? So whether you're Mark at age 20, Roger at age 51, or somebody, Sally at age 60, it's what is it I foresee for myself in the next 10 years? That's going to be hazy, right? A 20-year-old Mark doesn't even know what the 30-year-old Mark is going to be. You're going to be a different man. You'll be a version of who you are, but you're going to have a lot different priorities than you have right now. But you still want to cast a longer-term vision. But then you got to come back down to, what about in the next 5 years, where do you see yourself? And then you come down to, okay, in the next year or two, what do I want to get to? And then once you get down to those smaller time frames, then you can decide, what can I take action on to get to that 1 to 2 year version of Mark? And in the book, what I talk about is, well, you got to, one, cast where that is. And then two, from a financial perspective, you have to look at your cash flow, which is your spending, and your income. You got to figure out, okay, where are there risks and opportunities from a spending standpoint? And most of us focus there. We focus on budgeting and mint and tracking every single penny. And a good friend of mine, Paula Pant, said, there's only so much frugaling you can do, right? You can pinch pennies, but you can't move the dial huge. Where you want to look for risks and opportunities is from an income perspective, because that's unlimited. What can you do in the next year or two to improve the opportunity to earn more income? So that's the first conversation you want to have to identify things. The second one is to look at your net worth. So a net worth statement is basically one piece of paper that has all of your assets listed on one side and all of your debts listed on the other side. And you total them up and you subtract your debts from your assets, and that's your net worth. That's where your wealth goes. And that's where you make decisions on how to allocate your net worth to move towards where you say you want to go. So the book line, there's more to it, but the book outlines the rhythm of conversations in this format so you can always be taking action to improve and work towards the direction that you want to go to.
And I really liked how you mentioned listing the assets you have and the liabilities, because those are things where we could sometimes forget about them if we don't take the time to list them, like that gym membership that we have, something that we tend to forget about. So if you're taking the time to list all the assets and liabilities you have, it forces you to get into that mindset where you're more conscious about the current revenue, the current financials that you have, and some of the things you could do to build wealth, some of the things that are taking away from your ability to do that. So it's really good to lay all that out. But one of the questions that I do want to ask is that some people, again, they're heavily thinking about it. Other people, they're not too focused on retirement yet. But what do you believe holds most people back from planning for and having a successful retirement?
Well, I think I think a lot of it is the normal process has you has you focused only on saving and investing, on trying to get to some mythical number that says you're going to be okay. And that is, one, it's a horrible way to plan. So I say this to even baby boomers today, Mark, in that, baby boomers today are going to live longer than any generation in history. Okay, a 60-year-old, I used you as a 20-year-old, 60-year-old has a 50-50 chance of living over 90. So that's a 30-plus year time frame. So they're going to live longer. They're going to be much more active than any generation without outside of their career, which means they're going to spend a lot more money, and they don't have pensions. So what ends up happening with traditional planning, retirement planning, is when you calculate your number, it's this huge number that seems unachievable because the math doesn't work anymore. And the options that most financial advisors or financial planners will give you is, hey, you got to save more. You got to work harder. You got to control your spending. You're going to need to take more investment risk. You're going to have to not plan on retiring for a lot longer, and you may have to settle on less later on. Well, those are all really sucky choices. So who wants to sign up for that? And I think that's one reason why most of us don't really care about retirement planning when we're younger, is like, it doesn't mean anything to us. And then when we do it, all we get are bad choices that don't mean anything to us. I think it's much more about getting back to what can you do to live an intentional life and build a really great life. So that's one reason. And two, I mean, I take you, Mark. I have a 20 and 22-year-old. I mean, you're in a whole different season. You're just trying to build your life, and that's great. And the key is, early on, is to build the right habits early through the intentionality like we're talking about, so you can build the right habits that are going to serve you as your income grows and your career blossoms.
And like, I do like that, like, again, like, it's different based on like where you are, like your age, like, has a big factor, but it's something that you should be always like thinking about a little bit, like investing like a little now, like regardless of your age, and also being very intentional with the life you're leading. I mean, life isn't just about like how much money you have accumulated and using that money to continue paying for expenses. It's also about like, what kind of life do you want to live, the deeper questions like that we should continuously be asking ourselves. So a lot of great insights there, and I know that throughout any journey, including like a journey towards retirement, I mean, I know you're 51, so it may look a little hazy. Like, I mean, I'm 20, so like it looks very hazy for me, but I wonder if you could share with us one big challenge you have faced on your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
One of the big challenges I learned financially was in my 20s, was that I was in a position where I made money quickly from an income perspective. And I'm always a very optimistic guy, and I assumed that it would never go down. And I built a life in terms of obligations, large mortgage, car payments, things that I was obligated to based on my income and how awesome I was, and the fact that, wow, I can remember building spreadsheets. Man, if my income just increased on a relatively small basis, this is all awesome. Well, your income can go down. Life will hit you in the face really hard without you realizing it. I think at one point in time, my income went down peak to trough 80%. And usually that's going to happen after you've bought a house, have a mortgage, maybe have a kid or two, right when it really can't happen. So what I learned was, from all of that, is you really do need to be agile, and you need to constantly live within your means, which sounds trite, but what that does is it gives you flexibility to weave as the right hook.
And like, I really like that theme of being agile, because like different things are going to change, and it's better to focus on making a few tweaks to a few things instead of trying to have this perfect thing, because anything that like you create, even if you think it's perfect, it's going to change over time. So again, I really do like that theme on being agile. And another thing that I really like to enforce on Breakthrough Success is self-education. I mean, like, all listeners are doing a great job with it. They're listening to podcast episodes, but I also like to share some book recommendations. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 books that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
There's this book out there, I think I've heard of it. It's called Rock Retirement.
I think I've heard of it too.
Well, and it's about retirement, but it's not. It's about this agile methodology. But I'll give you two books that have been very impactful for me. Well, I could give you 100, really. probably the biggest one is a book called Linchpin by Seth Godin. And this is, I think, really important for you, Mark, and millennials, is more than ever, the central message of it that I heard and that spoke to me was the concept of being an artist. Because we live in a world that's racing to zero from a cost perspective, right? Whether it's asset management or name anything that used to cost a lot of money, now costs close to zero. And you can't out Walmart. That race to the bottom in terms of what you're going to charge for your services as a business or your services as a professional is a loser's game. And what he talks about in that book is embracing the fact that you are an artist. Even if you're a street sweeper, you are an artist. And the one thing that will always have value is the specialness that you bring. That can't be, nobody else can duplicate that. And it's how do you carve out that niche for yourself in whatever you do. And that could be, it doesn't have to be an entrepreneur. It could be working at a company as well. So Linchpin by Seth Godin. The other one is by Miller. I can't remember the first name, but it's QBQ, The Question Behind the Question, which is all about personal responsibility. It always comes back to you. Great book. I'll give you another one since I sort of cheated. And that is a book called The Daily Stoic. It is a daily read. You read one page a day, and it explores, very quickly a quote from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, these Stoic philosophers. And it's a great book to help train you for life and how to think.
Roger, thank you for sharing with us those great book recommendations. Those will all be in the show notes, marketability.com/E252. We'll also throw in content marketing secrets. You can get your free copy, just pay for shipping at marketability.com/book. And my upcoming book, Podcast Domination, will be in the show notes as well. But before we wrap up this episode, Roger, I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
What can I do next to move the dial?
Roger, I really like that question. Thank you for sharing that with us. Really gets your idea of actions that you could be taking to achieve your goal. So I do like that question. And thank you for sharing all of your great insights with all the Breakthrough Success listeners. If you want to learn more about Roger, simple way to do it. Get his book, Rock Retirement. It's available on Amazon, a few other places. It will also be in the show notes for this episode of Breakthrough Success. But Roger, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and taking the time to share all of your great insights with us. Thank you for taking the time.
You bet, Mark. You're rocking it, man.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn